Good afternoon, or sure, good afternoon. I'm so used to doing them in the afternoon. Don't you just love live TV? Good morning, good morning, everybody. Look, isn't it just gorgeous? There's no backing down once it goes live. It just goes that way. So, good morning, everybody. I'm your host, Billy Mann, and on today's episode of the Facebook Live series, I have the fabulous Lucy Jane Bainbridge. And I have known Lucy. Lucy's come back a good couple of years now, on and off, down through the last number of years. And for those of you, I'm going to get Lucy to introduce herself in a sec, but for those of you that don't know Lucy, she's the social media princess for sure and certain. Lucy helps coaches and businesses and entrepreneurs manage the world of social media, understand it, navigate it. But that's only part of that's Lucy's job, but she's also a coach. She does lots of amazing things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to you, Lucy. Okay, so to introduce yourself properly and detangle the mess that I have just I've thrown out there, and we'll go from there. Welcome, Lucy.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much for having me, Billy.
I'm delighted.
I love you so much. We've known each other for so long, haven't we? And I remember I've got a story to tell, like my fondest memory of you back in the Clary programme, but I'll say that in a minute. But yeah, so you said it perfectly. The social media priestess.
Oh, priestess. Yeah.
Well, I don't mind princess.
I prefer princess. Yeah.
That name is like, it's something that I created because ultimately it's an expression of everything I love in life, which is the tarot, the magical, the kind of spiritual elements that we've kind of disowned a lot in this culture. And so I do. I help people with social media and finding their confidence and their full expression on social media. And specifically doing things in a more of a quality way rather than a quantity way. Sort of a message out there that you have to post every day. And, I actually don't think that's true. In fact, I think it can be detrimental because that means you have to produce without, especially if you're this is really if you're a coach or a spiritual entrepreneur, but you have to produce a lot of content, and people just aren't gonna really feel it unless you're feeling it yourself. So I just find that there's this kind of like the typical social media advice wasn't helpful to me, and it hasn't been helpful to lots of other people. So I kind of try and get people to see that actually you don't have to do any of that, but like being more confident and working on your inner state is actually going to be more beneficial to your everything you do, not just social media.
Yeah.
Everything. And then what shows up from that place is always brighter, more high vibe, everything, than if you were just planning content like this. And so that's what I help people do. That's the Social Media Priestess School. And then I've been running Facebook ads as well for lots of spiritual entrepreneurs. So that's what I do. And thank you for having me.
Isn't it funny? And I do want to hear the story. You said you'd start, but I want to draw a correlation here, which I think is really, really important. And you just touched on it lovely. Yeah. All the work that you and I would do, regardless of how we'd approach it from whatever, because every angle is a human angle. Yeah. It's always the human angle. But we're ultimately pointing to the same thing, that the freer you feel in here, the moment that you open up to that expression of yourself, everything else changes on the outside. It's not trying to change the outside that makes the difference. It's about understanding what's going on the inside. And that's what if I'm hearing you correct, that's what you're saying.
It's absolutely that. But it's so much easier said than done. And I suppose becoming a mother has actually forced me to walk my talk in this sense. Because it's easy to kind of have, like when you're in this this world, like, okay, yeah, we do have these moments, these strong experiences, and it does gradually change and it seeps into our life, like the clarity, the principles, having that a spiritual experience of life and understanding who you really are. But then there's still aspects of our life that we still live from the patterns and the habitual. And so when I became, you know, a mother, and I didn't want to go back to teaching because it just wasn't an option for me to work like that and get next to no money to put George in child, like it just was, I just wasn't going to do it, basically. I had to like believe wholeheartedly, like, and really trust that it was possible for me to make money and to do all of that kind of stuff, and to do it. The only way I was going to be able to do it is if I really enjoyed it. And so then I couldn't do all of these things that everyone was kind of suggesting you do in a business, you know, like the kind of typical business plan method of running a business. And I had to just kind of trust my bloody instincts and just go for it. So there was a lot of inner work that had to be done in terms of allowing other people to support me and like investing in something before I had the money for it, and just stuff like that, where if I hadn't got that if I hadn't got this spiritual understanding, it just would have looked mental. It just would have looked totally nuts. Do you know what I mean? Like it would have just looked like illogical or irrational or like a bit naive. But because what I've understood about the principles and this is that we have been conditioned over years and years and years not to trust our own desires and our instincts and all of that kind of thing. And so it's like an act of rebellious faith is to just do what you bloody well want to do and believe that you can also make money and be a good mum and do, you know, like, you know, and so
and do shit, like have a good life, you know,
have it all ultimately, and to be able to help people in the way you want to help them, because, and to be a coach and to do this amazing work that kind of, and it feels sometimes like shouldn't be able to do it because it's not enough of a struggle, or it's like, you know, all of this stuff, but actually you can do what you want to do, and you can make money from it, and you can be a mum, and you can show up how you want to show up, and you can still attract clients.
You know, even broadening it out, just out God, you're singing my tune. You know, this is the structure of all of my conversations about becoming.
Yeah.
About becoming you.
Yeah.
It's not about swapping it out. It's not about creating somebody new, but it's about becoming you. Yeah. You know, and just being the fullness of your experience. But something that it took me a while to come to terms with, and you hit the nail right on the head, is that moment where actually it is okay.
Yeah.
To live the life that I want to live.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big shift. It was for me, you know.
Yeah, it's okay, and it's actually it's more than okay. It's more true than the beliefs that we've had for years. You know, like the kind of the agreements, the collective agreements that work is hard, and it's, you know, like it's humble or good. It's good to struggle. You know, someone in my family, nearly said who, said to me, you know, I think it would do you good. I remember being a kid and she said, I think it would do you good to go without, you know. And while I understand the grain of truth in what she was saying, like, I didn't feel like I was someone who was spoiled at all, but she, you know, there was this message, this consistent.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're too much, or you want too much, or you desire too much, or if you express what you want, then that's a bad thing, and you're kind of like, you know,
look at you getting all uppity in yourself and having big notions about yourself and this type. That would be the Irish version of it.
Exactly. And it's because ultimately that was what's been plastered into them, and so I feel like I'm always like having to breathe and like deal with that still on a day-to-day basis, and it's only because of say, the principles and having an understanding about how life works, that I'm able to actually not always choose the fear, you know.
Yeah.
Stuff.
The response time of it, you know. Yeah, oh, totally. It's funny, you know, when we talk about families are so unbelievably complicated in the sense of culture and, like you say, conditioning and expectations, and you know, my kids are going to kill me for saying this, but I mentioned this in Nicole Barton's self-discovery webinar the other evening. Someone said, oh, it must be great, you kids must think it's great to have you, you know. And I said, well, it would appear like that, but to them I'm just their father because they're seeing me walk across the house in my underpants. It's just an entirely different experience for them, you know. Do you know what I'm trying to say to you? I may have the answers for everybody else, but my God, I'm a nuisance as a father. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And that's the experience of life, you know, and that's how it unfolds, and into the ordinariness of families and stuff like that. And I would have found, as my own experience, Lucy, with close, very, you know, you find with close people in your life that you've, like you say, you've all that stuff going on, and there are times you have to catch your breath. But you know what I found? Fuck it. Got very clean with my lines around what I thought was healthy and unhealthy for an experience in my life.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't, it's not that I don't even, I just don't experience it anymore. I refuse to. I took a, as it were, that conscious decision to say, you know what?
Yeah.
That's fine. You're entitled to that opinion.
Yeah.
You're absolutely entitled to live the life the way you want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And conversely, so am I.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and it's being bound by the thoughts of others and stuff is so innate. Actually, it's primal.
It is.
That tribal thing needing to be accepted, and so. But what I found is that actually, so I was listening to Eckhart Tolle and Russell Brand do his Luminary podcast thing.
I love it.
Yeah, and then also, so what I just keep kind of noticing is this: you're never dealing with, like, the person that said to me, "Oh, you should go with that." It was just a passing bloody comment. Like, she ultimately, I don't matter to her in the way that I think I matter in her eyes. You know what I mean? So we're dealing. I'm dealing with my projection of her. I'm not even dealing with her and what she thinks. Like, that's the ultimate truth. So even when I then show up differently, I get a completely different response because I'm now free of what I expect her to think and all of that. And so ultimately, I actually see the clarity of it much more. And actually, it's never what you fear it to be, or because I'm adding so much projection and thought and fear onto what she said, like the words of what she said.
Yeah.
And so we're not really even dealing with what people think. We're dealing with our own versions of that. Yeah.
And isn't that the bloody genesis of a damaging belief right there? Yeah. I don't deserve good things.
Yes.
And when you're younger and, and maybe not as much now, but say with my parents and their parents and, like for generations, like teachers were taught if they don't learn, they beat it into them. If there's something wrong, they're ultimately stupid. It was very narrow-banded and hardship driven and like you were saying and all of that stuff. A little bit of going without wouldn't do you any harm kind of stuff,
Yeah.
But when you don't have the nuanced understanding of life, that stuff lands, it lands all the time.
And it's still, if I'm in default mode, it still runs the show. If I'm on autopilot, and it runs the show, these discs run the show. So I find I have to be really aware of it, really like ninja aware, like how, where am I making this decision from? Like, on what grounds am I making this decision? Like, based on what? When I get into, because we all have spirals of like patterns of areas where we feel like there's still an issue or something,
Yes.
you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
when I'm in those, I have to be really conscious. I'm like, yeah, because it's still cloudy to me. It's still not clear. Like, it's not, you know, there's still a lot of emotion involved and stuff like that. And so then I have to really be, you know, like fierce about, okay, this isn't old. This isn't real, is it? Like, you know, this has just come up time and time again, and it's not really worth following, you know, following.
How many times do we get caught up with that?
Yeah, like, so for instance, with trust, like self-trust, you know, like I've made bad decisions in the past. Well, not bad, like you could say it all is perfect, but you know, like if it's bad, then you would see them as bad because they're like drug taking, bad boyfriends, you know, like all of that kind of thing. And so I have this is a really interesting thing I've been seeing, is that any time I say yes to my pleasure in some way, I get this guilt, because ultimate pleasure used to be very reckless to me. It used to be like spending when I had no money. You know, it would be drinking, saying yes to drugs, getting in the car with a drunk driver, like, you know, like just because I would be chasing that
Chasing the high. Yeah.
And so for me to now say yes when I actually want something, it's like I have to, sometimes I still experience a lot of like, oh, you're reckless, you know, but it's like,
You don't deserve it. I know, yeah.
actually quite a good and logical decision, but because I also want it, it's like the two to go together, like the wanting of something, like the desire, like the actual, like that will be pleasurable, I'll enjoy it, has almost been like it's also been like, you know, in my mind it's also been, that must be it must be a wrong decision, you know, like it must mean that I'm being frivolous or something like that.
I know, yeah.
But actually it's a really good choice. So like an example of this is having a personal trainer. I've just got this personal trainer, and like it's brilliant. I've got so much energy. I'm like, you know, I'm just doing more with my day. I'm taking George out more because my energy levels were so low in the afternoon. I just find that I just literally want to crash on the sofa. So it's like, but to say yes to paying for a personal trainer seemed like
an indulgence.
It was so long because I still had that pattern running of like, well, that's, you know, you shouldn't really, you know, it's a bit much, you know, like.
I know it's a bit much. You know, look at the big notions in our personal trainer.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I know, Lucy. Oh my God. And it's what gets in our way is just a simple belief of the wholeness of the whole experience of living life, isn't it? Really, you know, that this is part of this. You know that this ultimately does make sense in so many ways, but like some kind of conditioned thinking, some kind of, I don't deserve this life, or I don't deserve to have this in my life, or I'm not worthy of it, or oh man, when that
managed to be careful all the time.
Yeah.
Careful.
Yeah. Slow down, you know, and like it's unfortunately for all of us, this is where the I suppose the societal conditioning is what we're talking about here, and how it gets passed down through families and stuff, is the fact that in a time where that made sense, where there was perhaps great hunger, you know, a majority of the population were substantially living, you know, going back 150 years, 200 years ago. I mean, we live like royalty now, you know, in comparison to people 150 or 200 years ago. We all have beautiful homes and heating and lighting. And for the majority of the population, we'll say, I won't say it's with that, but taking that as the norm. So somewhere in there, that misunderstanding about all of that got set in there. And then it got passed from father to son, or mother to daughter, or vice versa, however, but from generation to generation to generation to generation. And then we find ourselves in a society where this stuff is now freely available to us. We have access to this, but somehow this misunderstanding has been passed down because it's just, it appears real.
Yeah.
But
I think one of the things, the story that Jamie tells us about the Industrial Revolution and how that came to play, and how they went to the priests, they indoctrinated the kids, because we were working on this seasonal way where we would just go to, it really rung true for me. Like, it just did something for me, this story, so it might do for you. I'm not sure if you've heard it, you probably have, but basically that they couldn't get people to work 9 to 5 because they just weren't, they didn't have it in their cells, they just weren't habitually able to do that. Like, so they try and reward them with stuff, but ultimately people would just go AWOL because they were built for seasonal living, and they would work hard, and then they would stop working for the winter or, you know, periods of time. And so when the 9 to 5 came in, they went to the church, and they couldn't get to the current age generation that were actually working, but they could get to the kids by indoctrinating them with the idea that this working 9 to 5, like, and all the beliefs that were put on them were, you know, that's a good thing to do. That's how you, means that you are a good person. That means you're holy. That means you're non-sinful, is to work, you know, like a machine. And so, and it may, you know, like, again, there's no right and wrong. Like, it's got us to where we are. Like, there's a certain, but now we don't need to live like that. So, and so that's it. It's exactly what you're saying. Like, we don't need to, but we're still fighting we're still for us, the patterns are still running. So for George, they probably won't anywhere near. Like,
yeah,
they won't for me.
he's going to pick up whatever he's going to pick up, the inevitability. But if we can kind of decontaminate some bit of it along the way, you know, he has a better fighting chance of having a broader experience again without, you know, look, Lucy, you and I share a lot of tandems in our younger life, you know, with the reckless living, because when you're talking about it and you're telling, you know, I was the guy driving the car. Okay, I was the guy driving the car, you know.
Boyfriend.
Piling everybody in, come on, you know what I mean? And you know, no, I need to say this, there was lots of fun times there. Lots of fun times, and great. I made great friends, that many friendships that are as good today as they were back then. But that was the but, you know, of the need to be accepted, the need to feel part of something, you know, after years of being disconnected out of the boarding school and all the loneliness and all of that stuff. And so it looked, and this is an issue that I've had with some clients recently, it looks to me like the drugs and the alcohol and that was giving me the
source, the connection.
Correct. So the more I drank, the more I took, the more I did all these things, the more alive I felt. But like, the realization is that that's already going on within us. We just think it's something else that's giving us this. Oh, I have this now, so now I'm going to be super happy. You me? So it's giving me this makes me super. Well, actually, no, because that experience is already.
It's there, but it's the removal of the fear and the feeling of fear, and then that creates that thing. I remember being on ecstasy and lying out on the grass at my friend's house, and I was literally like, this has got to be possible without the drugs, because I was awake, you know, like, I was like, I can see how this must be, this is a real experience. Okay, there's more serotonin in me, but I just had this knowing that there was, like, this is possible without that pill. Like, this experience must be possible without the pill. I can remember it so clearly. And I have had experiences like that. I had big awakenings, but before, like you're saying, if you've never felt that connection without the drugs, then how could you ever? It would be just saying it. It would just be like a pipe dream.
Yeah.
So I feel very blessed that I was able to experience bliss and, you know, pure like love and peace without those. And that only really did come because of my search for it in terms of reading books and stuff like that. So I do feel lucky, but I don't even really remember being a child and experiencing that. Like, I just don't remember having that level of self-confidence and peace when I was a kid. And then I was bullied. That's why I started drinking and taking drugs, because when I started drinking and taking drugs, I was able to be myself, and then people responded to me much better. So it was like, how would I stop doing, like, you know, it's so clear, like, that's why I took them, like, and that's why it was really hard to get out of, because it's like, ultimately that's what you live for.
Testify, sister. Yeah, well, yeah, ultimately that's what you're living for.
Yeah.
Is to feel okay, to feel part of the community, to feel like you're part of something bigger.
Yeah.
But it's not coming from that, because even the understanding, or even having yourself pointed in the direction, or having that a little moment where you say, this has to be possible. And when I have these conversations with people, I would say to them, there is, if you're having the experience on or off drugs, it doesn't matter.
No.
That experience and that feeling is already in you.
Yeah, yeah.
And what the narcotic has done, or has pointed you in the direction of it.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand that it's actually already innate within you, it looks like it's the drug that's giving it to you. And I see that when you're saying that. And I've seen it, look, with clients. I have seen clients, you know, over a period of working with them, like, without ever addressing, we'll say, the behavioural issues around drugs or alcohol or something, to see them literally just over time realising that the very reason that they were taking them turns out to be the very reason why they stopped taking them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it turns on its head, you know.
Yeah,
and the clarity that arises with you when people realize, well, actually, this is actually impeding my growth. For the time it protected me and served me.
Yeah.
But you can't operate like that forever.
No, you can't. No, for me it was awful in the end. It wasn't like pills, it was coke. I was a major cokehead, and it just didn't do anything for me ultimately, but I couldn't stop taking it, just couldn't stop. And so I luckily had this full-blown experience, literally God-given. I have no idea where it came from. I was just reading a book and I had a spiritual awakening out of the blue. And so I actually feel completely blessed because of that. I feel very, very grateful, because it doesn't happen to everyone. A lot of people, and that's why, you know, going through AA and that kind of thing, it's a beautiful program. These programs are really, you know, like, they're really necessary, because then people do have these experiences. But I was just lucky, it just happened, it just occurred for me. So but it was through seeing the nature of thought. It was through reading a book like that. So it was something triggered, and you never know, it was an insight. This is the point with
the voice of God. I refer to an insight as, you know, that's the voice. It's telling you it's okay to do that now.
Yeah, and it was a rush. It was like oh my God, like, it was a revelation.
Yeah. And it's amazing how it kind of cuts through the noise. You know, I mean, this is, and again, and I'll bring this back around all the time. What we are, and all of these conversations are, Lucy, are literally the nub of this type of thinking, the nub of this type of the understanding that we're talking about. That in a moment, you know, like, and I'll just wheel it back just a second. If we think the answer is in moderating the behavior itself, we have missed the most elemental part of it, which is what you spoke about right there, which is so that the behavior itself just automatically starts to moderate and disappear or dissipate, whatever way, the moment that you begin to realize your own internal experience. And you know, and talking about it, this is what we do when we work with people, is we point them back to this, that, wait a second, this is actually unfolding within you. It's not out here.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know, that the challenges that you're having may appear like they're coming from out here, but they're not.
yeah.
They're coming from here, you know, and if like,
Yeah.
it's the simplest answer is just understanding it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's there's a real skill to making it, keep bringing it back to that, because something that I have seen over time, and I have, it's naturally occurred in me over time. But originally, I used to buy people's stories still, even when I knew this. Like when I was first coaching, it was like, yeah, okay, your life's really shit.
1 second, like going, I'll sit in the corner with you and hug my knees and cry with you while I was.
And they'll get,
Oh, cosmic humor. I know, yeah.
how can they fix the scenario? How can they fix it? You know,
Yes.
and what, you know, and so that are not, and so that it's a real, it's an asset to be able to keep bringing people back to that, and keep, you know, to keep your own clarity in that, because it's such a strong illusion.
Yeah. And look, you know the nature of it. I wish I could say, it's funny you're talking about Eckhart Tolle now, or Muja. I mean, would I love the universal download? You know, where, like, you know, like Eddie Ashanti says, like, it's like, I disappeared into this black space. He says, and when I was sitting there, he said, it just, all the stuff started pouring into the top of my head if I wanted to draw another image. Love that. But if you're like the rest of us, you know, sometimes it's about throwing the shovel over the shoulder and going to work. You know,
Yeah.
it's about, and it's about unfolding it and allowing it to unfold. And there comes a tipping point.
Yeah.
There does come a tipping point, and it is worth, even if all the confusion at the start, and you kind of, like you say, you're coaching at the start and you're getting, because ultimately, as I see it, there comes a tipping point where you kind of go, oh, now I see it. Like you say, you become a ninja with it, because the moment it just feels off.
Yes,
When you're
exactly.
struggling with the decision, it just kind of feels off.
Off, yeah, the feeling, you're so much in the feelings that you have, exactly.
Yeah.
And being able to see someone else in that state, and being able to bring them back. But it's interesting, like, as I've gone on, clarity, like when I became a mum, that threw me again. Like, I lost, and it's because ultimately you have a traumatic experience. It broke down my internal system. I didn't sleep for a week and stuff like that, and extreme pain and stuff like that. So there is these experiences that then throw you off, because then I identified as a mother, and it was almost different. And I actually got used to feeling stressed for a while. Like, I actually thought it was normal. You know, like, my body was like hyper stressed.
Yeah.
And I was like flinching. Stuart would come near me and I'd jump. So there was this kind of thing that was going on, but I actually just, it became my new normal. And then I had to really look at it again, and I had to be like, okay, something's not, cannot live like this, because I started drinking more wine again and stuff like that. And it was like, okay, this can't just be how it's meant to be. And then, so I feel like life will still throw you stuff.
Yes.
And it will still throw you bigger stuff, and it will, like, and then you are tested, and you do have to, like, even though you have I do think there's a fundamental understanding, but I think, and sometimes you can get, I don't think you're exempt from getting pulled back into the illusion.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. And despite all the years in this, Lucy, and how where I am, usually I find myself quite clear, but there are times, you know, and I'm always the first to put my hands up and say, I don't see it sometimes. You know, sometimes I get caught in it, sometimes I get swept up, and that's the way it is, you know. But one thing that I do know for sure, Lucy, is that when the shit hits the fan psychologically, and it will every now and then, because we're human beings, you know, that's the nature of what we do, you know. Sometimes we get lost in the fullness of whatever experience is unfolding in front of us. take my hands off.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd say, fuck, there's nothing I can do right now here. And whatever I'm going to do is not going to be most likely the right thing to do, you know, because I have fucked up enough times to know, you know what, now, so I put my hands in my pocket and walk away just for a little bit and it ought to settle down.
Yeah.
In here. When I say settle down, I'm not talking about the stuff out here because it can be raging away.
Yeah.
It's in here I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might take an evening, sometimes it might take a couple of days. I don't know. This doesn't come as a time span. But I'm patient enough sometimes just to say, well, okay.
Well, and that's a practice. For me, that's become a practice because it's so compelling to keep going, isn't it? That I see it with George, and he's got this red bus, and he gets, honestly, I'm going to have to throw the red bus out because he literally gets the hump with his bus.
It's the hump with the bus.
What does he do? He almost like does this thing with it, or turns it around, and he pushes it, and it's order. He really likes. I can already see like things lined up, and he's very like methodical. And then something goes off, and he just has this like meltdown. I have to remove the bus, and he's been 5 minutes, but the bus is gone. But it's the same with me. I remember with computer games. It was the same with a computer game. I'd get to a certain point, and then I wouldn't be able to get past this point. And rather than knowing, experiencing, okay, I haven't eaten in 3 hours because I've been obsessed with this game. I haven't, like, you know, gone for a wee. Like, rather than ignoring all of these things, I'm like, no, I will do it now. Like, I will push on. And then it would like, and then you just go away for 20 minutes, come back, and it would have been fine. But in your mind, it's like,
no, you're pushing through.
yeah. And so it's taking your foot off the pedal, which is just so hard when you're in it, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, because we're wired for fixing.
Yes.
We're wired for fixing, and that's and there's a time and a place for fixing everything. There's a time, I see it, you know, that, you know, it's like the discussion of goals and all of that, you know, goals are really important to serve, you know, to fix or sorry, put something in place or whatever like that. But they're a terrible way of living your life.
Yes.
You know, the goal of your life, that's a terrible way to live your life. But also, when you are fixing something, it's about fixing a problem or whatever that's external.
Yeah.
But we don't need internal fixing. It's just all about understanding that nuance that we're swept up in whatever story that we've got going on up here. And those feelings are part of it.
Yes.
And the feelings aren't confirming that stuff out there. It's actually saying, bang, you have got some seriously shit thinking going on right now, you know. And if you say something or do something or it's absolutely coming from there. It's not coming from anywhere clear. You're up here and you've got the rage on, or you've got the upset on, or the embarrassment on, or the humiliation on, or the anger, whatever story is going on. You're absolutely not seeing the situation clearly. You're just not.
And that is literally the opposite of what we've been taught for generations. So that there is the most powerful thing that we can teach. It should be like the bread and butter, shouldn't it? It should be like the emotional guidance system is telling you the opposite of what it think. Like, but it's not even what we think. It's just that we've never been taught that. So it's clear when someone points that out, but it's like, we still run with it. We still think, no, like I'm still like that in my relationships. Like, it's just still have a go at Stuart because I'm justified. No, like
come over here to me, you.
Like, it's so obvious. Like, how could it, you know? And then later on, like, I just didn't need to. You know, like, so I do recognise it, even though I recognise it. It's like it's still so compelling. So I think it, like, if we can get that into children's like heads, like that means you right. This is, you just need to overheat, like you're overheating. That's it. Overheating.
Yeah.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a metaphor I use all the time, you know, when I start, because usually, you know, when clients, you start working with clients, they'll come to you with this problem, but you know, it's that's where they're starting, you know, and it can appear at the past, or like, and I have had numbers, particularly, unfortunately, women in this case that would have a certain trauma from a teenage year and stuff like that, regardless of what the shape of it is. But you could be drawing your own conclusions to it, but they arrive with that, you know what I mean? And often it might take me a number of sessions of just letting the heat out of all of that first before there's even any turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Just slowing that stuff down enough. Because if anybody's been caught in that psychological dilemma and the pain and the suffering that goes on, and they could be attached to that for 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless you're really fortunate, like I say, and you get the universal download, you're maybe going to have to come to terms with it first to understand it, and then turn it around. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It is about removing the heat. And I suppose as time goes by, Lucy, when we're doing this work, we recognize that we can self-police it, for the want of a terrible way of describing it, but we can be vigilant around it, that we know that when we're swept up, that now is a really bad idea. It's a really bad time to make a life-changing decision or response, because you can change relationships that way. I know many of us have done that. By having a row with somebody, you know, and 2 days later,
yeah.
if I had just turned around and walked away, like my initial instinct was, but oh no, couldn't fucking let it go, could I? Could I not let it go? I was full of the righteous fire, you know, and I've burned bridges, and I've done it.
Yeah, and it's also about seeing why you're doing that rather than beating yourself up about it, because then it's really easy for me to go into all this judgment. But actually, it was never modelled to me how to stick up for myself in a way that isn't aggressive and it isn't mean.
And to get what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so
Get what you want.
I didn't have a single person in my life modelled that to me. The people that modelled power to me were angry, dominant, and bullies. And then the people that weren't were stronger, actually, now I see. But they were passive, and they were kind of, it seemed quite submissive. Well, that's how it looked. Maybe it wasn't, but it didn't seem like.
A lot of them had just went, you know what?
Yeah. What controlled me was and so that's hardwired. That's the point. Like that is you are dealing with something that's so, you have to be so aware in the moment. That's the point. It's the lifetime's work. It doesn't have to be. You can have an insight, but you don't always get an insight around something. So it's like you do still have to practice the physical reminding yourself of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Put my hands in my pocket, step back slowly, and I'll come back to this maybe in an hour's time. It might be the thing to do. Yeah, that's wisdom.
You have to actually use it more like a practice than a natural thing that just occurs. Actually, you're going to have to actually be rigid on it, otherwise it's going to come up and it's still going to run.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucy, I'm conscious because I know of the time, because I know that you have the wonderful little George to pick up in the next couple of minutes. So 2 things I want to ask you before we go. One is the story that you said. Okay, one is the story, because I'm curious to hear what you're going to say about that, because am I going to die with embarrassment and crawl underneath the table?
No.
I don't know. And then just if people ever want to find you, where would they find you, etc. like that, so that, because like I say, I'm conscious of the time. I know you've got to go and pick up George from care.
So there's the social media initiation is a Facebook group. That's where I do all my trainings and like connect with my clients and stuff, like free stuff in there for that. I've got an audio series I'm just about to give away for free, which is all about visibility. It's a set of audios. It's all about being more visible and overcoming the fear of being more visible and showing up fully expressed online. And that's coming out, so you'll know about that if you're in the social media initiation. But if you just want to message me on Facebook, you can also do that.
Or put the link below this after this video. put the link, we'll post the link onto it so that way then the people can find you. Maybe that would be the easy thing to do. But no, Lucy Jane, what's the story? And on that final note, oh please go on, tell me more. You know.
So I just remember sitting next to you. We were watching the TED Talk in the Clarity program, and Jamie had shown that TED Talk of that guy, and he's talking about how the world is like a computer, like they're like a computer screen, so we see objects, but actually we're not seeing what's actually happening. So you see an icon on the desktop, and like it's actually loads of code, because it's not actually a folder. Like you can't pick off the folder off the screen and it's actually a folder. It's just a little icon, right? But what it does is it acts as a folder for files, but actually it's, if you could see it for what it was, it would be really frigging confusing and really unhelpful. So we see things like in objects and in form to help us navigate the world, right? And I just remember you turning around to me. It's not even that funny, but it literally made me laugh so much. You just whispered in my ear, "Lucy, you're an icon."
I was clearly paying attention.
Lucy, you're an icon.
And you are, Lucy. And you are, damn it. You're my social media princess. Oh my God. Because you're not the priestess to me. I'm giving, you know, you're just going to be my, because I've referred to you as the social media princess, I think, right from the very start. Yeah. And I don't think I'm going to let it go anytime soon.
That's fine. You know?
But thank you very much, you beautiful icon. You. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. I will be in contact with you. To everybody else that has joined us this morning, or we'll pick up on this later on. Thank you all so much, and a special, of course, special thanks to my friend, the icon that is Lucy Jane, and the social media, okay, priestess, but for a lovely conversation about the simplicity, you know, and about living a very ordinary life, you know, and about in an extraordinary way, to the understanding of what it means to have a life that we want.
Yeah.
And the answer is actually really simple, and I'll refer to this all the time. It's just simply about understanding what's going on for ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's it. And it's okay to have the life that you want. You know, you don't need my permission. You don't need Lucy's permission. You need nobody's permission in the world to be who you are, because you're already that.
Yes.
And on that note, I will leave it there. To everybody, thank you all very much for joining us, and I'll talk to you the next day. Bye for now.